I'm with the Department of Food, Nutrition, Dietetics, and Health. I teach the capstone medical nutrition therapy classes for our K-State students. I'm also a registered dietitian, and I work part-time at Clay County Medical Center, which is a small 25-bed rural critical access hospital in Clay Center, Kansas. I first became acquainted with MOOCs through a conversation with Ben Ward, who's an instructional designer here at K-State. I have never actually taken a MOOC on my own, which may sound strange, but I was looking for something different to do, and Ben said, why don't you try this out? So I applied for a grant through Global. And I should also mention a former student of mine actually first brought up the word MOOC in a casual conversation. I looked it up and then I approached Ben about how would we go about doing this. And Global indicated that they were interested in supporting a MOOC because K-State did not have one. And so I jumped in without really knowing what I was doing. My former student, who's also an RD, her name is Diane, she and I together developed the content, and then Ben helped us learn the technical side of things. So it was really just a lot of let's try some things that we think might work. I did some research about what had worked and not worked with other MOOCs. Our main goal was to try to make it as personal as possible so that we kept the readers' interest. Our topic was health and wellness. We had to keep it very general because you can't be prescriptive in terms of health and diets without basically needing a doctor's order, for example. So we couldn't provide medical advice because I'm only licensed in the state of Kansas. So I couldn't provide medical advice for somebody with diabetes, for example, since our clients were all over the world. So we did make sure they understood that this was a general health and wellness class meant to promote a state of good nutrition. And if they did have questions as we went through the course related to disease states, we encouraged them to seek out a registered dietitian or in their country, whatever the equivalent would be. And some of the advantages of a MOOC, asynchronous, they can work on it at any time that they want throughout the world. And it was free. That's obviously a big advantage. And you can get very creative depending on the platform that you used. We used SoftChalk, and with SoftChalk we were able to put in a lot of fun stuff. We had videos, a lot of pictures. I pulled up quotes. We had games, interactive games that they could play. And really what I considered one of the more important things was we had discussion boards. And so if we were talking about ways to prepare fruits and vegetables, or how to get your kids to eat fruits and vegetables, or how does someone who's just starting to exercise find something they enjoy, our users were jumping in and sharing a lot of tips and strategies with each other. And I think that's very helpful because they had the practical information and could talk about things that had helped them, things that hadn't worked. So that was good. We had some pre and post tests so that they could see if they learned. It also helped us with some data collection. And one of the things that I did each week was I asked them to post questions about that week's content, and then we had a live chat the next week that was only 30 minutes long. And we also recorded the chat so it could be played back for those who weren't able to attend. But again, a very practical way to keep them interested in the topic and to keep a personal connection when they could say, you know, this was really interesting, but I also want to know such and such. So this was their opportunity for me to address it. So I enjoyed that part also. The disadvantages of the MOOC is it's free, which was also an advantage. The disadvantage of the MOOC is because it's free, you've not invested anything other than your time. And we do know that when people have a cost associated with something, it may motivate them to stick with it because they've already paid for it. But we wanted to make this open access to as many people as possible. So that was probably a disadvantage, is the retention rates tend to be low. Historically, retention rates will be, I've told on the average, 5 to 8%. We based, of your total enrollment, we based retention on, of those students who enrolled or looked at, opened up the very first lesson how many of those opened up the last lesson, which was lesson 8 or lesson 6, I'm sorry. So that, because there's really no standard on how you measure retention. We exceeded the average rates. We had retention rates for all 3 of them right about 20%. In fact, the last one, I think our retention rate was 24%. So we basically quadrupled the industry standard on keeping people's attention. We gave them a lot of practical advice, websites to go to. But another disadvantage of our MOOC was it was designed to be worldwide. The information we provided them was based on the U.S. health recommendations. The websites were based on U.S. websites. So every now and then somebody would ask me a question about maybe a grain product in their country, and I couldn't answer. I just told them you'll need to contact somebody in your own country. The first time we offered it, we did not put it into metrics because we were thinking of the United States. So we had to correct that with a second offering. Even though people can go out and convert to the metric system on their own, we should make it as easy as possible. So with the second and third offerings, it was in both U.S. measurements and the metric, which is the more international measurement. But that was a disadvantage, is trying to design worldwide and yet not able to provide worldwide resources. Other disadvantages, I would say that some people say that having the discussions can get rowdy at times, I guess, or some people might be rude because maybe they don't know social etiquette. We didn't really have that, so I can't say that was a disadvantage for my discussion boards. Everyone seemed to be very respectful, and I never had to step in order to moderate any conversations. So it's always a possibility that could happen, but we had a very respectful population. So I liked that. So the MOOC was a very enlightening experience, a very rewarding experience. I would say one more disadvantage, it takes a lot of time. And I did it as a service for my department in K-State. I did not get paid for it. And it did. It took a lot of time. Once the course was actually developed, just to moderate it, answer questions each week, set up the chats, I would say I probably put in about 4 hours a week because I responded to every introduction. So if 800 people posted an introduction, they got a response from me. As each discussion, and we had 1 or 2 discussions going every single week, I would periodically post responses, just kind of on a random basis so that they knew I was reading it and providing some participation, but I couldn't. So that was about 4 hours a week. And so I offered it 3 times, but again, because it was all volunteer time, my schedule became too busy to continue with it at that point. I might do it again in the future when I'm getting kind of bored and looking for something fun and interesting again, which I'll say an advantage was it was fun. I loved doing it. I enjoyed the contributions by the people, the questions that they asked. So that was an advantage, is that it was rewarding for me personally and professionally.
How many students have you managed in this time?
I would have to go back and look at the numbers again, but the first enrollment was over 2,000. I believe the second enrollment was about 1,600, and I think the third enrollment was about 1,800. But again, at the end, it was about 20 to 24% that we had retained, which I was really bummed about. Until everybody pointed out to me, this is so much higher. And I think the reason we did well on retention rates is we did make it very personal and very interactive. They knew that somebody was reading their post. They were interacting with each other. We had very practical information. And so I think that kept them coming back.
What kind of students did you get for classes?
We did collect statistics on what kind of students that we had. If I remember correctly, probably slightly over half, well, I would say it was more like 70%, I think, had high school education. There was actually a fair amount with a college degree, even some with a PhD. My guess is those were the PhD were other professors wanting to know how a MOOC worked and were checking us out. It was more predominantly female than male, which fits the pattern of women are more interested in health, women are more likely to see a doctor, women are more likely to look up health information on the web. So that fit the characteristic. I believe our average age was middle 30s to maybe middle 40s.
Okay. Thank you so much.